Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Stories from the Field with English Language Programs. My name is Kim Gomez, and I am currently an Outreach and Marketing Coordinator with the program in Washington, D.C. I was also a fellow in Uganda. I'm joined today by Kim Carroll. Hi, Kim.
Hello.
Kim, can you introduce yourself to us quickly, maybe what you're doing now and where were you a fellow?
Sure. My name is Kim Carroll. I'm currently in Greenville, South Carolina, and I was a fellow in Paraguay in 2019, 2020, and a specialist after that in Paraguay. And I'm currently a specialist in Peru and a few other things, a few other projects.
Well, great. Thank you so much for being here, and we're excited to hear your story. Your story is titled What Not to Do in a Job Interview, so I'll let you take it away.
Okay. What not to do in a job interview. By the time I made it through the many-stepped application process to become a fellow, culminating in an interview with the US Embassy in Paraguay, I was already pretty sure that I wanted to accept the project there. It seemed like a good fit for my skill set and was an exciting adventure all at the same time. Now it was time to see if they thought I was a good enough match for the project. We connected by phone because it was a hot day in Asuncion and the electricity was wavering, not so good for a Zoom call. And it started 20 minutes late for what I soon would learn to be the usual reason anything would start late: traffic. Somewhat nervously and formally on my part, it's an interview with the embassy after all, the interview began. But really, it was only moments until I felt really comfortable with the team and the proposed project, and I had a sense that they liked me as well. It actually was a great conversation. We talked about the host institute I would be working with. They warned me about things not always going as planned and about living in a developing country. And I assured them with a story and a joke about my previous Latin American bus travel. I think I even tried out some rusty Spanish on them too, that I was ready for the challenge. Then they asked me if I had any questions for them. Well, I felt it already blurting out of my mouth as my brain was flashing the danger warning: do not say this at a job interview. Well, not a question, but I'm queer. I rambled on in my discomfort. I know that South Americans in general are very relational, and the first thing they're going to ask me is if I'm married and if I have kids. And I also know a big part of my job is to build relationships with people. And am I going to have to lie? What can I expect people's reactions to be when I tell them that my partner is a woman? Will I be able to be effective in my job if I'm open about this? Well, the reaction to my declaration is not the point of this story, although I was assured that the embassy and the State Department are in full support of hiring people that reflect the population of the US, and that local folks may or may not approve, but it wouldn't affect how they interact with me. My concern about how to bring my whole self to this new exciting adventure is also not the point of this story. Thinking about how we have to negotiate our identity in a new context is nothing new, especially for queer people, even though it looms large when traveling to a different country. The point of this story is how working as a fellow, a relatively privileged position in a country where being gay may affect your job, your rights to marry, and your rights under the law, shifted my point of view. One of my favorite parts of being a fellow was traveling around the country, giving workshops for teachers, and visiting English classrooms. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. I started to understand more clearly through this how important visibility is, especially for young people who may be struggling with their own identity. I remembered, as I observed interactions, that having even one role model in your life, someone like you who has grown into a functional adult with a good job and a close family and a wide circle of friends, if you can see yourself in that person, it unlocks the possibility in your own future. Well, don't be mistaken. I was not that person in Paraguay, except maybe in a few small ways, but it stirred in me a desire to open up a conversation about LGBTQ awareness and visibility in English language classrooms, both at home and abroad. How are we making space? Are we making space for the voices of queer teachers and students? Are we providing positive representation so that they can see themselves living extraordinary and ordinary lives? The students I visited in Paraguay will be going to their own job interviews in the relatively near future. I hope they and all kids their age won't have to have the warning signal in their head reminding them, don't say this at a job interview. But really, that depends a lot on the doors that we prop open for them today. Thanks for listening to my story.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks so much for sharing that. And like you said, your own learning process and shifting your own views and the importance of a role model and visibility, not just in the culture there, but everywhere, I would assume. And so you mentioned making space for the voices of queer educators, students, and materials. So how are you continuing to do that? Or do you have any tips for educators for doing that?
Sure. I started thinking a lot about it, and I've actually had the opportunity to work with groups of educators in South America through a webinar series and some workshops about how to do this in their classroom, to learn more about it and to figure out how it works in their own context, because we all have our own contexts and how that works. Some of the things we talk about are, as English teachers, we have to talk about families and we present vocabulary and language. And so one thing is encouraging us teachers, all teachers, to get beyond the textbook family, because there's a lot of non-traditional families that people live with all the time. And giving people the language to talk about their own experiences is really important. Not just a family that might have two moms or two dads, but families where you're raised by grandparents or a single parent family. Another thing would be thinking about the language you use in your classroom. Are you being inclusive to people that maybe have a partner of the same sex? Are you presenting language in ways that people can actually respond with their own experiences? And finally, are you creating a space of belonging so that people feel safe to share those experiences? And as we're learning language, we have to learn this language to negotiate our own realities. So just those little things can help open up space, I think.
Yeah, that's so important. Thank you so much for sharing those examples and tips for other educators. I'd love to shift a little bit to your project itself. Could you maybe share a highlight professionally from your fellowship?
Yeah, I got to do so many really interesting things. As I mentioned, I had a chance to travel to different areas of the country and talk with teachers and also students. One of the big projects that we worked on was putting together a teacher camp. So this was a 3-day immersion camp for English and pedagogy, and it was really challenging to put together, but it definitely was a highlight. I was there about 5 months at the point that we were working on this, maybe 6 months. And I really had to draw on resources from everyone I'd met since I'd been there. All the connections that I had made, I felt like I was asking for favors and can you spare a person to help, or can we borrow this material? And it just really made me see that even in 5 months, how much you can grow to understand or become part of a community. It felt really good to be able to do that in such a short time.
Oh, that sounds so fun, a 3-day camp. And like you said, a lot of work. And I think that's one great note to mention about the fellow program is Fellows do teach English, but there's also a lot of opportunity for teacher training, but creating a lot of these professional development or big events, whether it might be one workshop or a 3-day camp or conference, that they have to plan A to Z with their counterparts. And so there's a lot of room for growth personally as a fellow as well. So if you were to choose 3 words to describe your time as a fellow, what would they be?
There's a lot of words, but 3 that come to mind are challenging, transformational, and fun.
I like that you ended with fun. Well, thank you so much, Kim, for sharing your story with us again. And, if Kim's experience sounds interesting to you and you are a U.S. TESOL professional interested in teaching abroad, you can learn more about the Fellow Program at www.elprograms.org, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Kim, thanks for being with us today and for sharing your story. It was so fun to chat with you.
Thank you so much. It was great chatting with you too.
All right, bye everyone.